Very urgent. Your soulmate needs to explain what happened last night. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because something unusual happened last night. Not something dramatic. Not something anyone else would immediately notice. Not something that would make headlines or become the center of attention. Yet for your soulmate, it felt important. Important enough to stay awake thinking about it. Important enough to replay it over and over. Important enough that they now feel they need to explain what happened. And listen to this. The evening began normally. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt unusual. It was simply another day coming to an end. The sky darkened. The world became quieter. People finished their routines. Lights slowly turned off across the city. Everything seemed ordinary. Yet sometimes the most meaningful nights begin looking completely ordinary. Because your heart needs this right now, because life often hides important lessons inside ordinary moments. Your soulmate was about to discover one of those lessons. And listen to this. As the evening continued, they found themselves unusually thoughtful. Not sad. Not worried. Just reflective. The kind of reflection that appears when life finally becomes quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. The kind of reflection that appears when distractions disappear. The kind of reflection that asks questions you've been avoiding. Because your heart needs this right now, because silence often reveals what noise keeps hidden. Your soulmate was entering a moment of silence. And listen to this. At first, they ignored it. They focused on small tasks. They kept themselves busy. They told themselves everything was fine. That there was nothing to think about. Nothing to analyze. Nothing to understand. Yet the feeling remained. A quiet feeling. A persistent feeling. A feeling that seemed determined to be noticed. Because your heart needs this right now, because some realizations arrive only after they have patiently waited for our attention. Your soulmate could no longer ignore it. And listen to this. As the night grew darker, they sat alone for a while. No conversations. No interruptions. No distractions. Just a quiet room and their own thoughts. And suddenly, memories began appearing. Not dramatic memories. Simple memories. Conversations. Moments. Lessons. Experiences. Small things that once seemed ordinary. Yet now they felt different. More meaningful. More important. More connected. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes we only understand the value of certain moments after enough time has passed. Your soulmate was beginning to understand. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more another realization appeared. Life had changed them. More than they realized. More than they admitted. More than they fully understood. The person sitting in that room last night was not the same person who existed months ago. Not the same person who carried old fears. Not the same person who carried old doubts. Not the same person who viewed the future in the same way. Growth had happened. Quietly. Gradually. Almost invisibly. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth often happens while we're busy focusing on other things. Your soulmate was finally noticing it. And listen to this. For a moment, they felt emotional. Not because something bad happened. Because they suddenly realized how far they had come. The challenges they survived. The lessons they learned. The strength they developed. The wisdom they gained. All of it suddenly felt visible. And that realization was powerful. Because your heart needs this right now, because recognizing your own growth creates a unique kind of gratitude. Your soulmate felt grateful. And listen to this. Then something unexpected happened. A question appeared. A simple question. Yet it immediately captured their attention. The question was, what am I supposed to learn from all of this? The moment that question appeared, everything changed. Because suddenly they stopped thinking about individual moments. They started thinking about the bigger picture. The journey. The lessons. The growth. The purpose behind everything they had experienced. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful questions often lead to meaningful discoveries. Your soulmate was about to discover something important. And listen to this. The answer didn't arrive immediately. Instead, more reflection appeared. More memories. More understanding. More awareness. And slowly, a pattern began emerging. Every challenge had taught resilience. Every setback had taught patience. Every disappointment had taught perspective. Every success had taught gratitude. Nothing had been wasted. Every experience had contributed something valuable. Because your heart needs this right now, because even difficult chapters can contain meaningful lessons. Your soulmate was finally seeing those lessons clearly. And listen to this. As midnight approached, another realization appeared. One that felt surprisingly comforting. The realization was, maybe I don't need every answer tonight. Maybe I only need to trust that the lessons are working. The moment that thought appeared, something inside them relaxed. The pressure disappeared. The need to understand everything immediately faded. The uncertainty became easier to accept. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often arrives when we stop demanding certainty. Your soulmate was discovering peace. And listen to this. For the first time all night, they felt calm. Not because every question was answered. Because they finally trusted themselves enough to continue without every answer. That trust felt different. Stronger. More mature. More lasting. And suddenly they understood why the night felt important. The night wasn't about finding answers. It was about discovering trust. Trust in their growth. Trust in their journey. Trust in themselves. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-trust is one of life's greatest gifts. Your soulmate was beginning to embrace it. And listen to this. As the hours passed and the world remained quiet, one final realization settled into their heart. A realization they knew they would remember long after the night ended. It was this. What happened tonight wasn't confusion. It wasn't uncertainty. It wasn't a problem to solve. It was a reminder of how much I've grown. The moment that realization appeared, everything felt lighter. The questions felt smaller. The future felt less intimidating. The journey felt more meaningful. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth becomes powerful the moment we recognize it. Your soulmate had finally recognized it. And listen to this. When morning finally arrived, they felt different. Not transformed overnight. Not magically changed. Simply more aware. More honest. More grateful. More trusting. And that is why they feel the need to explain what happened last night. Because the night wasn't about a dramatic event. It was about a quiet realization. A realization that changed the way they viewed themselves, their growth, and the path ahead. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because after the realization began forming inside your soulmate's mind, sleep became almost impossible. Not because they were afraid. Not because something terrible happened. Not because they were overwhelmed. Because a single thought refused to leave. A thought that quietly followed them through every hour of the night. And listen to this. After midnight, the world felt different. The noise had faded. The distractions had disappeared. The responsibilities of the day had finally gone silent. And in that silence, something unusual happened. Your soulmate stopped focusing on what everyone else expected. Stopped focusing on appearances. Stopped focusing on obligations. And started focusing on one thing. The truth. Because your heart needs this right now, because truth often becomes easier to hear when everything else grows quiet. Your soulmate was finally listening. And listen to this. The thought that kept returning wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shocking. It wasn't complicated. Yet somehow it felt powerful. The thought was, why does this still matter to me? At first they dismissed it. They told themselves it wasn't important. They told themselves they were overthinking. They told themselves they should simply move on and get some rest. Yet every time they pushed the thought away, it returned. Again. And again. And again. Because your heart needs this right now, because important questions rarely disappear until they are understood. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that. And listen to this. The deeper they reflected, the more they realized the question wasn't really asking about one moment. It wasn't asking about one conversation. It wasn't asking about one memory. It was asking about something larger. Something deeper. Something that had quietly shaped their growth for a long time. Because your heart needs this right now, because the biggest lessons often hide beneath simple questions. Your soulmate was uncovering one of those lessons. And listen to this. As the hours passed, they started looking back. Back through recent months. Back through important experiences. Back through challenges they thought they had already understood. And suddenly they noticed a pattern. Every major lesson in their life had begun with discomfort. Every important realization started with uncertainty. Every meaningful breakthrough started with a question. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth rarely begins with certainty. It begins with curiosity. Your soulmate was becoming curious. And listen to this. One memory led to another. One lesson connected to another. One realization opened the door to another. And slowly, the bigger picture began appearing. The challenges that once felt unfair. The delays that once felt frustrating. The questions that once felt exhausting. All of them had contributed something valuable. All of them had shaped who they were becoming. Because your heart needs this right now, because every chapter leaves behind wisdom. Your soulmate was finally seeing the wisdom. And listen to this. Around the middle of the night, something shifted. The reflection became more honest. More direct. More personal. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Why did this happen?" and started asking, "What did this teach me?" That single change transformed everything. Because suddenly they weren't focused on problems anymore. They were focused on lessons. And lessons create growth. Because your heart needs this right now, because perspective changes everything. Your soulmate's perspective was changing. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more another realization appeared. They had spent so much time searching for answers in the future that they forgot to appreciate everything they had already learned. The patience they developed. The resilience they built. The courage they discovered. The wisdom they gained. All of it was already there. All of it already belonged to them. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth deserves recognition. Your soulmate was finally recognizing it. And listen to this. For a brief moment, they felt emotional. Not because they were sad. Because they were grateful. Grateful for lessons that once seemed painful. Grateful for challenges that once seemed unfair. Grateful for growth that happened quietly in the background. And suddenly the night felt less confusing. The questions felt less heavy. The uncertainty felt less intimidating. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often reveals hidden meaning. Your soulmate was discovering that meaning. And listen to this. Then another realization appeared. A realization that stopped every other thought. The realization was, maybe I have been searching for certainty when what I really needed was trust. The moment those words settled into their heart, everything became clearer. Because certainty depends on the future. Trust depends on yourself. And self-trust is far more powerful. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust creates peace where certainty cannot. Your soulmate was beginning to feel that peace. And listen to this. The clock continued moving. The night continued passing. Yet something inside them felt lighter with every passing hour. The questions were no longer creating pressure. They were creating understanding. The memories were no longer creating confusion. They were creating perspective. The reflection was no longer creating doubt. It was creating clarity. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity often arrives gradually before changing everything at once. Your soulmate was approaching that moment. And listen to this. As the first signs of morning approached, one final thought appeared. A thought so simple that it almost seemed obvious. Yet it carried extraordinary power. The thought was, I don't need to know exactly what happens next. I only need to trust who I have become. The moment that realization appeared, the entire night suddenly made sense. The questions. The reflection. The memories. The lessons. Everything pointed toward that truth. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-trust is one of the greatest forms of freedom. Your soulmate had discovered a deeper level of it. And listen to this. When the sun finally began rising, they felt different. Not because the world had changed. Because they had changed. Their perspective had changed. Their understanding had changed. Their relationship with uncertainty had changed. And for the first time in a long while, they felt calm. Truly calm. Because they finally understood what the night was trying to teach them. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because after hours of reflection, after every question had been asked, after every memory had been revisited, your soulmate finally reached a moment they could no longer avoid. A moment of honesty. A moment of clarity. A moment that quietly changed the way they understood everything that happened last night. And listen to this. The night had started with questions. Questions about the future. Questions about the past. Questions about lessons that still felt unfinished. Yet as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The questions slowly began transforming into answers. Not complete answers. Not perfect answers. But meaningful answers. The kind that arrive when a person finally stops running from their own thoughts. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding often begins when we stop resisting reflection. Your soulmate had stopped resisting. And listen to this. For a long time, they believed they needed certainty before they could feel peace. They believed they needed every answer before they could move forward. They believed they needed clarity about every possibility before they could trust themselves. Yet last night challenged that belief. Completely. Because your heart needs this right now, because some of our strongest beliefs are actually limitations in disguise. Your soulmate was discovering that. And listen to this. As they sat quietly in the darkness, another realization appeared. A realization that felt surprisingly emotional. The realization was, I've spent so much time trying to control outcomes that I forgot to appreciate my own growth. The thought lingered. Because it felt true. Every challenge had taught something. Every disappointment had revealed something. Every success had strengthened something. Yet they rarely stopped to acknowledge it. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth deserves recognition. Your soulmate was finally recognizing it. And listen to this. The deeper they reflected, the more they noticed how much their perspective had changed. Things that once seemed overwhelming now felt manageable. Things that once created fear now created curiosity. Things that once felt like obstacles now looked like lessons. And suddenly they understood something important. The circumstances hadn't changed nearly as much as they had. Because your heart needs this right now, because personal growth changes how we experience life. Your soulmate had grown tremendously. And listen to this. For a moment, they looked back at who they used to be. The version of themselves from months ago. The version that doubted more. The version that worried more. The version that struggled to trust the process. And they realized something remarkable. That version of themselves had survived every challenge, learned every lesson, and slowly evolved into the person sitting there now. Because your heart needs this right now, because every version of you contributes to who you become. Your soulmate felt grateful for the journey. And listen to this. The night continued. The silence remained. Yet the atmosphere felt different. Lighter. Softer. Almost peaceful. Because the more honest they became, the less they felt the need to fight uncertainty. Instead of demanding certainty, they began accepting reality. And acceptance brought unexpected freedom. Because your heart needs this right now, because acceptance often creates peace where resistance creates stress. Your soulmate was finally experiencing that peace. And listen to this. Then came the truth they had been avoiding. The truth that explained why the night felt so significant. The truth that changed everything. It was this. I am not the same person who started this journey. The realization hit deeply. Because suddenly every challenge made sense. Every lesson made sense. Every period of waiting made sense. Every difficult moment had contributed to their growth. Nothing had been wasted. Because your heart needs this right now, because even painful experiences can become valuable teachers. Your soulmate finally understood their lessons. And listen to this. For years, they measured progress by external results. Achievements. Milestones. Visible outcomes. Yet last night showed them something different. Real progress isn't always visible. Sometimes progress looks like patience. Sometimes progress looks like emotional maturity. Sometimes progress looks like learning how to trust yourself. Because your heart needs this right now, because inner growth is often more important than external success. Your soulmate was discovering inner growth. And listen to this. As the clock moved closer to morning, another realization appeared. A realization that felt almost like a message. The message was: you don't need to have everything figured out to move forward. At first, the thought seemed simple. Yet the more they considered it, the more powerful it became. Because so much of their stress came from trying to solve tomorrow before tomorrow arrived. Trying to predict outcomes. Trying to eliminate uncertainty. Trying to guarantee results. And suddenly they understood. Life doesn't work that way. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth requires trust, not control. Your soulmate was learning to trust. And listen to this. The night had not given them every answer. Some questions remained. Some mysteries remained. Some uncertainties remained. Yet strangely, that no longer bothered them. Because they finally trusted themselves enough to handle whatever answers eventually arrived. That self-trust changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because confidence is not certainty about the future. It's confidence in your ability to face it. Your soulmate had discovered that confidence. And listen to this. As the first light of dawn began appearing, they reflected one final time. The questions. The memories. The lessons. The growth. Everything. And one final realization settled deeply into their heart. A realization they knew they would never forget. It was this. Last night wasn't about finding answers. It was about discovering trust. Trust in my journey. Trust in my growth. Trust in the person I am becoming. The moment those words settled into place, something inside them relaxed completely. The pressure disappeared. The fear softened. The future felt open instead of intimidating. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-trust transforms uncertainty into possibility. Your soulmate was finally experiencing that transformation. And listen to this. As morning arrived, they understood why the night had felt so important. Not because something dramatic happened. Not because a secret was revealed. Not because the world suddenly changed. Because they changed. Their perspective changed. Their understanding changed. Their relationship with uncertainty changed. And that quiet transformation became the most important thing that happened all night. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because after an entire night of reflection, after every question had been explored, after every memory had been revisited, and after every emotion had been examined from every possible angle, your soulmate finally reached the moment they had been moving toward all along. The moment of understanding. The moment where everything suddenly made sense. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to change their perspective. Enough to change the way they viewed themselves. Enough to change the way they viewed the future. And listen to this. As the first light of morning slowly appeared on the horizon, your soulmate remained awake. The room was quiet. The world was still. The night was ending. Yet something important was just beginning. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity often arrives when we're finally exhausted from resisting it. Your soulmate had stopped resisting. And listen to this. For hours they had searched for answers. For hours they had replayed conversations. For hours they had examined thoughts they usually ignored. For hours they had tried to understand why the night felt so different. And suddenly the answer appeared. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Quietly. Gently. Almost like a whisper. Because your heart needs this right now, because the most important realizations rarely arrive with noise. They arrive with peace. Your soulmate was finally feeling that peace. And listen to this. The realization was simple, yet powerful. The realization was, nothing unusual happened last night. What changed was me. The moment that thought appeared, everything clicked into place. The questions, the reflection, the emotions, the memories, the lessons. Everything suddenly connected. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the biggest transformation is not external. It's internal. Your soulmate had experienced an internal transformation. And listen to this. For a long time, they believed growth would feel dramatic. They believed personal breakthroughs would arrive with certainty. They believed understanding would instantly solve every question. Yet last night taught something completely different. Growth felt quiet. Growth felt subtle. Growth felt almost invisible. Until suddenly it became impossible to ignore. Because your heart needs this right now, because real growth often happens slowly before revealing itself all at once. Your soulmate was finally seeing it. And listen to this. As the sun slowly rose, they looked back over everything life had taught them. The difficult seasons. The unexpected setbacks. The moments of uncertainty. The lessons hidden inside disappointment. The wisdom hidden inside patience. The strength hidden inside struggle. And for the first time, they appreciated all of it. Not just the easy parts. All of it. Because your heart needs this right now, because every chapter contributes something valuable. Your soulmate finally understood the value of every chapter. And listen to this. Then another realization appeared. One even deeper than the first. A realization that changed how they viewed the future. The realization was, I don't need the future explained before I move toward it. The thought felt freeing. Because for so long they had been waiting. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for guarantees. Waiting for perfect timing. Waiting for complete understanding. Yet life had been teaching a different lesson the entire time. Trust first. Understanding later. Because your heart needs this right now, because confidence grows through action, not prediction. Your soulmate had learned that lesson. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more they realized how much energy had been spent trying to control things beyond their control. Trying to predict outcomes. Trying to avoid mistakes. Trying to eliminate uncertainty. Trying to guarantee happiness. Yet none of those efforts ever created peace. Peace arrived only when they finally let go. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace begins where control ends. Your soulmate had discovered peace. And listen to this. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped asking, what if things don't work out? Instead, they started asking, what if I'm stronger than I think? That question changed everything. Because suddenly the focus shifted. Away from fear. Away from uncertainty. Away from imagined problems. Toward strength. Toward resilience. Toward trust. Because your heart needs this right now, because the quality of our questions shapes the quality of our perspective. Your soulmate's perspective had changed completely. And listen to this. As sunlight filled the room, they noticed something surprising. The answers they spent all night searching for weren't hidden somewhere far away. The answers had been appearing throughout the entire journey. Every lesson, every challenge, every experience, every moment of growth. All of it had been preparing them. Preparing them to trust themselves. Preparing them to move forward. Preparing them to stop doubting their own strength. Because your heart needs this right now, because preparation often disguises itself as difficulty. Your soulmate could finally see the preparation. And listen to this. Another realization soon followed. A realization that felt almost emotional. The realization was, the version of me who started this journey would be proud of the version sitting here now. The thought brought unexpected gratitude. Because suddenly they could see how far they had come. Not just physically. Not just emotionally. Spiritually. Mentally. Personally. They had evolved. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth deserves acknowledgement. Your soulmate was finally acknowledging it. And listen to this. For years they believed strength meant never struggling. Never doubting. Never feeling uncertain. Yet last night taught a better definition. Strength is continuing despite uncertainty. Strength is remaining open to growth. Strength is trusting yourself even when the path ahead isn't fully visible. And suddenly they felt stronger than ever before. Because your heart needs this right now, because real strength comes from self-trust. Your soulmate had found that self-trust. And listen to this. The explanation they now feel compelled to share is actually very simple. Last night wasn't about confusion. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about a secret. It wasn't about something happening around them. It was about something happening within them. A shift. A realization. An awakening to how much they had grown. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-awareness changes everything. Your soulmate had become deeply self-aware. And listen to this. As the morning continued, one final truth settled gently into their heart. A truth they knew they would carry forward from this day on. It was this. I don't need to become someone else. I don't need to wait for perfection. I don't need every answer. I simply need to keep growing. And trust the person I am becoming. The moment those words settled into place, something remarkable happened. The pressure vanished. The fear softened. The future opened. And for the first time in a very long while, they felt completely at peace. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace is not the absence of uncertainty. Peace is trusting yourself within uncertainty. Your soulmate finally understood that. And listen to this. Before leaving the room and beginning a brand new day, they smiled quietly to themselves. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because every question had been answered. Because they finally understood the lesson. The lesson hidden inside the entire night. The lesson they now feel compelled to explain. The lesson that changed everything. The lesson was: last night didn't change my future. Last night changed the way I see my future. And that difference was powerful enough to transform everything.